Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Don't forget, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, July the 11th through the 13th, 2019, Ardmore Convention Center. All right. We are continuing our examination of what Jesus predicted in Matthew chapter 24, when the disciples asked him about signs of the end of the age and of his parousia. He gave them warnings. They're going to deliver you up to persecution. And he said, many will be offended for my name's sake, will betray one another, and will hate one another. I've already shared with you yesterday how this is based upon Micah chapter 7. Well, guess what? It's also Hosea. I just absolutely love the fact that there's so much in the New Testament that if we are properly familiar with the Old Testament, we can hear the echoes of those Old Testament prophecies so clearly. Richard Hayes, who is one of my favorite authors, has done such a magnificent job of bringing to light so many of these echoes and illustrating for us how the New Testament writers were just saturated with a knowledge of the Old Testament. And how for the New Testament readers, for the New Testament audiences in the synagogues and in the temple, when the New Testament apostles would speak and they would give a key word here, a partial phrase there, and their audience automatically knew the text that they were citing, that they were alluding to. I'm shocked at times in which people will say, well, such and such in the New Testament, that cannot be a citation of the Old because the New Testament writer doesn't say, well, and Hosea said, or Isaiah said, or Micah said. They didn't have to, folks. Their audience knew the Tanakh inside and out. A simple key word, a key phrase or term automatically told their audience what they were saying. It is our ignorance of the Tanakh that causes us to read right over so many of these allusions, these echoes, these citations even. And what Jesus predicted in Matthew chapter 24 is a prime example of this. Look, in Matthew chapter 24, I've already shared with you how he talked about the persecution that was coming and the apostasy. He said, many false prophets will rise up and deceive many because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. We'll get to that more. But I just want to share with you, I didn't really intend to do this, but when I sat down, I thought, well, I just got to do this. Just like I had to share with you that Micah chapter 7 is being echoed directly here in verse 10. Well, guess what? Micah 7 is directly parallel to Hosea chapter 9. And I want you to notice in Hosea chapter 9, it is talking about the impending destruction of Israel, the 10 northern tribes, being carried off into Egypt and Assyria by the Assyrians. And he says, they, that's Israel, shall not dwell in the Lord's land. Ephraim shall return to Egypt, shall eat unclean things in Assyria. They shall not offer wine offerings to the Lord, nor shall their sacrifices be pleasing to him. It shall be like bread of mourners to them. The one who eats it shall be defiled, for their bread shall be for their own life. It shall not come into the house of the Lord. Now watch this. What will you do in the appointed day? Because of Israel's sin, God had appointed a day. Now, in other passages, for instance, in the time of Jeremiah, written a couple of hundred years later, a similar judgment was being predicted, and it was called the day of visitation, the day of the Lord's presence, prosopon. But here, as a result of Israel's sin, which, remember, is echoed by Jesus in Matthew 10, echoed by Jesus in Matthew 24, what will you do in the appointed day? Now, by the way, Daniel chapter 12 had a whole lot to say about the appointed day that was coming. And that day, the appointed day at the time of the end, would be consummated when the power of the holy people is completely shattered. Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. Any idea when that might be? Or might have been? Okay, what will you do in the appointed day? And in the day of the feast of the Lord. You know what that is? That's Rosh Hashanah. That's the last of Israel's eschatological feast days. It pointed toward, it pointed forward, it foreshadowed the resurrection. Indeed, they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up. Memphis shall bury them. Nettles shall possess their valuables of silver. Thorns shall be their tent. The days of punishment have come. The days of recompense has come. Israel knows the prophets are a fool. The spiritual man is insane because of the greatness of your iniquity and great enmity. Did you notice the reference to the false prophets? Well, let's see. In Matthew chapter 24, many false prophets shall arise and shall lead many astray. Now remember, Israel believed that her past history was typological and foreshadowed the last days. And here we have Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, Matthew chapter 10, directly citing Micah chapter 7, which is a direct echo and parallel with, contemporary with, Hosea chapter 9, which appointed Israel's destruction at the appointed time of the end. Folks, this is such magnificent, wonderful harmony and unity if we are attuned to it. For us to completely ignore the Old Testament background, the Old Testament fountain from which Jesus' eschatology flowed, is a reflection on us. Okay? It is a reflection on us. We need to be better students of the Tanakh. So, what we have here in Matthew chapter 24 is Jesus echoing Hosea chapter 9, Micah chapter 7, and other passages as well, by the way. And as we will see as we continue in our discussion of the great apostasy, all of these things are part and parcel of the end time narrative that Jesus emphatically and specifically delimited to his generation. He didn't say, oh, for this generation, and by the way, for the last generation. No. You don't find anything similar to that. All of those things happened in the first century. That means the day of visitation happened in the first century. Peter was expecting it, 1 Peter chapter 2:12. Jesus predicted the day of visitation, i.e. the fall of Jerusalem, Luke 19:44. So once again, all of those things belong to the first century. That means you cannot divide the Olivet Discourse into AD 70 and so-called end of time. All right? Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. Don't forget, this month is, over half over. You want to take advantage of the May 2019 two-book special. I'm sorry, the special price does not include overseas shipping. Okay, I can't do that. But go to my website, order Elijah Has Come, and Into All the World Then Comes the End. There's a banner right up at the very top. Order those books. You'll be so glad you did. Bring clarity to your understanding of Matthew chapter 24 and the time of the end. Okay, thanks for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I do really appreciate it. I'll see you on the flip side.